Stay calm, my dad said as I stuck my hand into the pool water. Before I could respond, he pushed me straight into the water, and it was the deep end. I struggled as he held on to me and kept telling me not to panic. All the while, it felt like he was trying to drown me. You're a natural, he said as we got out of the pool. It seemed like an eternity since I'd gone in. We'll get you that scholarship. Just you wait. I could only nod after the shock had faded away. I had to do this. What I really wanted was to get into a great university. University students had so much freedom. They were studying things that actually mattered and having the best parties too. But whenever I thought about it, I got pretty sad. I knew there was no way I was getting into one with my grades. I just wasn't smart enough. Academically speaking, at least. I figured that if my grades weren't up to scratch, excelling at sports could be my ticket to getting into university. Every day, I would take the bus to my dad's club. We did a lot of training and drills. I even made a new friend there, Mindy. Mindy had her sights set on the swim team, so we had a lot to talk about. She was also a pretty good swimmer and a faster learner than me. We started sharing everything with each other, and I even told her some of the tips my dad had taught me. Then, she told me something that would change my life. One day after training, I asked Mindy why she wanted to be on the team so badly. She told me about a swimming event that was held every year at the club. Only members of the team could take part in it. There's a cash prize and everything, she said. Then she lowered her voice before continuing. And the rumor is, recruiters from universities secretly come and watch it. Like a secret talent hunt? I asked, amazed. Mindy nodded. And if they like what they see, they might just offer you a scholarship. That was my dream. I knew right away that this was going to be my shot at the life I wanted. But there was one big problem. There wasn't room for both of us. Mindy told me that they would only take the winner. She said that it was her dream to go to university with her scholarship because her family couldn't afford the fees otherwise. I didn't tell her that it was my dream too. It didn't seem like the right time. I went home and told my dad about it. He nodded and said he already knew, and that's exactly what he was preparing me for. But first, he said, a little warm-up. I've signed you up for the Charity Swim Fest. It was my 14th birthday when the charity event took place. My mom and dad were in the stands cheering louder than anyone else's parents. Clearly, everybody else knew this was just for fun, but my parents didn't get that memo. I tightened my goggles and took my place in my lane as the announcer instructed everyone. I waited for the gunshot and dived right in as soon as it fired. My mind began to daydream as I hit the water. I dreamt that I was at the club event instead and that I was swimming for a scholarship. I kicked my legs as hard as I could, and I could almost hear the crowd cheering for me with each stroke. Before I knew it, I had completed all the laps and won the competition by a whole 9 seconds. I was out of breath and struggling to climb out of the pool. But as soon as I did, my parents were there to hug and congratulate me. I looked around to see a cheering and clapping crowd, but there were fewer people than in my head. I made eye contact with a woman in a suit who was sitting at the far end. She was just staring at me. Weird, I thought. I dried off and was called to the stage to receive a medal. I noticed my dad had tears in his eyes as it was hung around my neck. The very next day, I started to focus on entering the grand event at the club. I needed to be a member of the club's swimming team first for that to happen, though. I showered and walked to the pool. There was a woman standing there waiting for me in a suit, and I recognized her from the crowd at the charity swim. Does she only have one suit? I thought to myself as I walked over to her. So, autograph? I asked her with a laugh. Actually, I was hoping you would swim for us, she replied politely. What? I stopped, confused. You see, she went on, I'm from an agency, and we are considering masters in training young athletes like yourself. The woman handed me a professional-looking business card. I saw you swim a few days ago, and I have quite the eye for talent. We would like you to be our new face. I was so excited. I was going to be famous, too. You won't be swimming against people for charity, though, the woman added. The people at this club are really good at what they do. We will get you on the best nutrition plans, get you the best training, and make sure a talent like yours is where it deserves to be, at the very top. There was something magical about her voice. My mind wandered and I thought about winning the scholarship again. The crowd in my head was about to start chanting my name when I heard the door swing open and my dad walked in. Ah, there you are. I was looking. He stopped when he saw I was talking to the woman. I tucked the card into my hair. Dad, this is— I know who this is, he interrupted me. You're the one with those fancy agencies, aren't you? He turned to the woman. A pleasure to meet the man behind this wonderful talent, the woman said. Whatever you're selling, we don't want it, Dad suddenly declared. I stepped aside as my dad got into an argument with the woman. She was trying to tell him that his methods wouldn't work when I inevitably faced real competition, as I'd never swam many laps in an event before. She was also telling him about the new equipment they had for training muscles to become stronger and more agile in the water. But my dad didn't want to hear any of it. We're doing fine. I've been at this for a long time, and I never needed any fancy tech, he said. Well, why don't we let the girl decide? The woman replied, calm as ever. They both looked at me, and I didn't know what to say. Could the woman really get me that scholarship? I thought. I looked into my dad's eyes and knew that there was no way he would let me do it. My dad got me this far, so I'm going to stick with him, I said slowly. My dad's eyes shined and he smiled as the woman walked away without another word. After training that day, I sent Mindy a message explaining everything. He wouldn't even listen to what she had to say. Like, hello, it's not the 70s anymore. Maybe he just doesn't know how the new gadgets work, you know? My teacher thought airplane mode would get his iPhone to fly, Mindy replied. Your dad hasn't let you down yet. She made a good point. Little did I know I would soon miss her good points. I decided to tell her everything. I told her that I was preparing for the swim team so I could get the scholarships too. Mindy was silent for a long time and I got really nervous. Those 3 terrible dots were mocking me. Eventually, she sent a text. And it wasn't a happy one. We both know you're a better swimmer than me, the message read. She said that I wouldn't have even known about the event if it weren't for her, and how I could take her dream away. I was surprised by her texts, one after the other, angrier and angrier. She felt so strongly about this. I started to feel bad. I looked at the mysterious woman's business card on the table, and I just knew that I had to see this through to the end. I texted Mindy that I was sorry, and I went to sleep. The trials for the swim team took place the year after, and I spent all my time training with my dad. Mindy stopped coming to the pool, and she wouldn't even reply to my texts anymore. I was really getting worried about her. After a few months, I asked my dad if he knew where she lived so I could go check on her, but he said that she was fine and he'd seen her around the club while I was at school. I was sad about losing Mindy, and I wondered if she'd given up on her dream because of me. Was I a terrible friend? How much more would I be willing to give up to get this scholarship? My dad started to notice that I was getting distracted and gave me more drills to keep me busy. I ended up falling asleep early most days because I was exhausted. But in all that time, I never forgot about Mindy. When I was 15, I was ready to take the swimming test for the team. I was pumped. I could feel the energy running through my veins as I took my place at the pool. I looked at the other contestants and saw Mindy at the far end. I was surprised but really happy to see her. She made it. What I saw next, though, made me want to pinch myself. Behind Mindy, sitting comfortably in a chair, was the woman from the agency. Next to her were 2 muscular women carrying bags and bottles filled with what looked like an energy drink. The woman looked the same as ever and smiled at me briefly. My dad saw what I was looking at and reminded me to focus. Oh, they're messing with the wrong family, he said. I took a deep breath and tried to get my thoughts away from Mindy and her multiple trainers. I readied myself and dived in the very second I heard the whistle. There was no daydreaming now. I knew I couldn't afford to lose. I had trained too hard to have it end here. I put all my energy into every lap and every turn, counting each lap as I went. The second I finished the race, I pulled myself out of the pool and sat on the side, breathing heavily. My dad walked over with a towel. Don't worry, you still made it. Don't worry, I thought. That means I definitely need to worry. I stood up and saw Mindy sitting in a chair with some kind of special cushion. It looked super comfortable. She wasn't even breathing as hard as me. I looked at the scoreboard and my heart fell. Mindy finished in first position. I was in second by a full 3 seconds. 3 seconds? I thought, shocked. I was thankful that the club took the top 2 from this test, but I also started to wonder what special treatment Mindy was receiving from that agency and if my dad really was too old school. My dad was quiet on the ride home. He must have been thinking the same thing. The next morning, I saw the agency card lying on the table, and I couldn't resist. I dialed the number on the card, and the familiar voice of the woman answered. sounding way fresher than I thought anybody could on a Sunday morning. I asked her what she did with Mindy. "Why did you come to me if you were going to make her your star?" I asked angrily. The woman told me that the offer was still on the table for me and that Mindy's father hired her agency only until the club event. I paused for a moment. "Still there?" the woman asked eventually. I thought about the scholarship and what it meant to me. My dad wants what's best for me, after all, I thought to myself. "I'm in," I told the woman. Somehow, I could feel her smile at the other end of the phone. "Excellent. We'll be in touch." The woman hung up, and I took a deep breath. I needed to convince my dad. I found him watching TV and greeted him. There was no point in hesitating, so I told him I accepted the offer. He was furious. He angrily asked how I could betray him like this, and why I didn't trust him to get me the scholarship. "You saw Mindy, Dad. You know I've always been faster than her, so how did she beat me?" I managed to say. My voice was shaking. I'd never fought with my dad before. "I hope you know what you're doing," he concluded and walked away to his room. I sat down on the sofa with a heavy heart. First Mindy, now my dad? How much more would I need to give up for this scholarship? We had lunch without speaking that day. My mom was confused as to what was going on. She tried to ask my dad, but he just grumpily chewed his potatoes. Right after lunch, I got a call from the agency. They said they would send over a car to pick me up. I asked my dad if he wanted to come with me, but he told me to sit down and listen to him. He told me that the agency was a fraud and that they would use illicit performance-enhancing drinks to make athletes fitter. I was horrified. That would explain Mindy's outstanding performance, I thought. I decided to give Mindy a call and tell her these weren't the type of people we wanted to mess around with. Of course, she didn't believe me. She thought I was trying to put her down and increase my chances of winning the competition. I was extremely sad at her response because I was only trying to be honest with her. I decided that my dad was indeed the best trainer for me. After all, we'd been training together for so long. A whole year passed and the day of the race arrived. My chance at my dream university. I walked to the pool and saw Mindy there. She looked at me and smirked. Before taking my place, I looked at my dad and said, "No matter if I win or lose, you'll always be my hero and I'll always love you." I got into my position at the pool. It was time. The gunshot rang out and I blazed through the first round. There was a feeling of deja vu as I finished my laps and landed first place. The crowd erupted with cheering. I climbed out of the pool feeling depleted but accomplished. I looked at Mindy and could see she was surprised at coming in second place. I was given a couple of hours to rest before the next round, and it was a very welcome rest time, which came with a drink from my trainer. The bell rang and I got back into place. I didn't even feel tired anymore. My training was paying off, but I got overconfident in this round. I swam thinking I was unstoppable. When you're underwater, you really can't tell. At the end of the round, I got to see that Mindy was in first place this time. I walked over to the woman, still in her suit. She was still calm as ever, so I asked, "Aren't you glad that Mindy won that round?" She replied, "We don't care who wins. We just want to experiment on younger athletes so that professional swimmers can benefit from the results." "Thanks for that," I said sarcastically. I sat down to rest, but something in me changed. The woman's voice didn't seem so magical anymore. She didn't seem worried about my scholarship like my dad was. All she cared about was her agency getting the credit for whoever wins. I looked over at Mindy preparing for the final round, then at my dad, who gave me a thumbs up. I was nervous. I'd lost my best friend for this. The bell ringing interrupted my thoughts. I went over to the pool for the final round. At the sound of the final gunshot, I dived in. As I swam, I gave it my all at first, but then I started to think about Mindy and what it meant to her. Maybe she did deserve it more than me. After all, I just needed to get better grades, right? Towards the end of the final lap, I made my decision and slowed down. I reached the end to hear cheering, clapping, and a roaring crowd. I was breathing raggedly, but I wiped my eyes to see all the applause was for Mindy. She'd won. Her family was crying happily with her outside the pool. I walked over to my parents and my dad was talking to me again. He was trying to console me and saying it'd be okay, but I didn't feel sad. I felt happy seeing Mindy so excited. She looked over at me and smiled warmly. I waved back at her. At least I'd won my friend back that day, and my dad. As we left, I saw a man approach her and take her aside from the crowd to talk privately. She'd clearly got the scholarship. When I got home, I went to bed and cried into my pillow. I was happy but sad at the same time. It was a strange feeling. The phone started ringing, and it was an unknown number calling. I picked it up through tears and nearly dropped it as I listened. The man on the other end was saying he was a recruiter from a university, and he'd tried to find me after the race, but I must have left in a hurry. Then he said something I never expected. He was offering me a sports scholarship. I thought you only took the best, I asked with a runny nose, shocked. We're smart enough to see that this year there were 2 of the best. His voice made it seem like he knew about my decision not to win. So, what do you say? I thought about Mindy. She and I would be going to the same university. There was no way I'd let her go again. I'm in, I answered.